like to call the meeting to order for the school district board meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's board meeting. We're going to start with the open forum, but I'd like to read a statement first. Open public forum will be placed on the agenda for regular board meetings. During this part of each regular school board meeting, up to 10 minutes of time will be allowed for district constituents to address the school board. Each person is asked to identify him or herself by name, and if he or she represents an organization, to name the group. Remarks should be addressed to the board as a whole. Each presentation may have up to 2 minutes of time. The school board will not hear complaints about individual school employees or permit discussions of such matter in an open meeting. No response, reaction, nor action shall necessarily be taken by the board during the open forum portion of the meeting, and the school board will take no action at a meeting on an issue raised for the first time by the public. Tonight, our open forum sign-up, we had 15 community members that would like to speak. So because of the time limit, I've chosen to select 5 people. And so I just took the top 3, or the first 3 that signed up, and the last 2, just to make sure that it was fair that way. If we end up not going 10 minutes, we'll add at the end, but that's how we're going to proceed at this point. Also, we'll have a timer. Ashley will be doing the timer for us. And so the first person I'd like to call up is Al Helgerson.
Hit the button. It's red. Is that on? It's on. You can hear me? All right. Yeah, my name's Al Helgerson from Albert Lee here. I guess I'm the president of our union. If you wanted to know that or not. I'm an organization and then also belong to the people here. It's been 4 weeks already, and so I thought I'd come in and talk to you guys to get a little pulse of how things are going with the staff. We've had a lot of good things happening. We got the flex time worked out. Some of the staff really appreciates being able to come early and go late. 15 minutes with their kids. Another thing, when I talked with Mike earlier, try to make some good things out of the COVID deal. Conferences are going to be Zoom again. And I don't know if you realize this or not, but when some parents come in, they can't find daycare, people to watch their kids, they bring in 10, 15, I shouldn't say 10, 15, but, 5, 6 kids. And, so that's a thing. Beth Isaacson and Jim Meyer from the Ed Minnesota are going to come, and Ed Minnesota is going to come down and help, again, with phone calling for the referendum. And so we got that going for us. Back to the mask, or to start with the mask thing, I'm at Southwest, and it's not a problem at all. And I actually would like to commend for going to the elementary with mandatory mask. We have a teacher that teaches in the elementary. Her father is in his 70s. He has cancer. The mother's gone. She died a few years ago. And she's the one that has to take him to the treatments. And she's very concerned about, she deals with, I don't know if she's 1st or 2nd grade. And one last thing before I go, we're working on the disability bank, and that's another plus that our members really like. So that's kind of a heads up what's going on. Yeah.
Next on the list is Kelly Enzer.
Do I take my mask off? You guys can hear me with it on. My name is Kelly Enzer. I'm from Albert Lee. I just wanted to start by saying thank you, first of all. But there comes a point in everyone's life when we face adversity and uncertainty. Some situations we train for, and yet some we are caught off guard by. The way in which we respond to either situation is what makes us a great state, a great county, a peaceful city, a respectable school district, and a cohesive community, and a supportive member of each of these. In many organizations, leaders are elected or voted in. We need leaders. Without them, there would be corrosion from within and no standards to follow. No integrity, there would be chaos. Toxicity blames, and then latch on to words like amendments, freedom, and rights. Over the last 2 decades, I found myself wondering how the world continues to find people who are willing to take on the role of a leader in a world full of ugly hatred, inconsideration, and selfishness. When the last of my children graduate from Albert Lea Area School District, I will have accumulated 72 years of parenting in these schools. 6 children times 12 years of school is 72 years. That's more than anyone I can think of. So I wanted to take the time to thank all of you. Teachers, staff, administration, supportive school board members, local union members. Thank you. You have had to navigate through uncharted waters, and you have taken on more than imaginable to make sure every student feels safe, loved, and supported. Over the past year and a half, you've had to deal with the backlash and negativity of community members, finding new ways of teaching and holding conferences, safety procedures for yourself, students, and our entire community. And you have continuously risen to the challenge. For all of this, I want to say thank you. Thank you for keeping our community safety as your #1 priority and bravely making challenging decisions based on facts, science, best interests, and standing strong in your decisions. Thank you very much.
Next is Melinda Telemontes.
Hi, I'm Melinda Telemontes. I live here in Albert Lea, and I work at Halverson Elementary. So good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today. Like I said, I teach 4th grade at Halverson Elementary, and I've been teaching for 12 years. I would like to take this opportunity to talk to you about our new elementary science curriculum. It's called Amplify. Our district recently purchased this curriculum for all 4 of our elementary buildings. Although we've just started the school year, when we've just begun diving into the materials with our students, we have been given a few training opportunities as well. Upon speaking with the other teachers, both in my building and in other buildings that have started using this curriculum, there are a few, and they are all a few lessons in, as am I would like to share with you some of the exciting things that we are seeing. Our students are engaged. They're excited, and they're working collaboratively. They enjoy the online simulations and the investigations they are participating in. They are learning to think like scientists. We are not teaching science as an isolated subject this year. The curriculum provides students with math opportunities, reading, writing components, critical thinking opportunities, and hands-on materials in the form of experiments, which they love. All of the materials are provided, and each building has an equitable access to the materials and the resources. The materials are high quality and renewable. That's an exciting thing for school teachers. They come well organized. They also come with extension opportunities and differentiation for all students. The lessons have real-life applications. For example, when asked today how many students have experienced an electrical blackout, almost every student shared their experience about losing power. We have to investigate what causes these blackouts in this lesson and come up with solutions to prevent blackouts. One of the hands-on experience we'll be using will include a solar panel to convert energy. Talk about exciting.
Next is Jeff Miller.
I would like to thank all the board members for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Jeff Miller. I'm a retired educator. I live here in Albert Lea. And I guess if I really want to disclose the skeletons, a former teacher here as well, back in the mid-'80s through the late '90s. And I ended my career as an assistant principal in a neighboring district, about the same size as Albert Lea. And as part of those duties there, I spent a great deal of time as an assistant principal dealing with attendance and dealing with making sure that our building was staffed properly, dealing with any kind of issue ranging from training for potential shooters to N1, H1, you name it. All kinds of things that happen in a normal high school situation. And I feel like I want to emphasize to you that how important it really is in order for school districts to operate. They're people-driven. We don't have widgets, we have people. In order for people to perform, either as a teacher or as a student or as an administrator or whoever it happens to be, you need to be able to come into an environment that you know is going to be safe, and you know it's going to be healthy, and it's going to be welcoming. And as a school board, I would highly encourage you to do and consider anything that's going to make that happen. And in this particular case, I know that there are some things on your agenda tonight that are going to talk directly toward safety and health of your students and your staff. And I would highly encourage you to ensure that you do all that you can. And that would include masking your students and your staff. You've already made that decision. It's the right decision. Stick with it. Thank you.
I apologize for not saying this name right, but it's Mike Shodog. I'm sorry, you can share with us how it is. Yeah, I'll give you a little 5 seconds to tell us how to say your name.
Okay. My name is Michael Shep, and I'm a retired educator who spent 20 years in the school district. And the first thing I want to do is thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I also want to express my gratitude for how well you've handled these uncharted waters of COVID-19. I did some research this afternoon, and I discovered that 94.7% of medical professionals in this country are in favor of masking. Granted, that's not all of them, but there are still medical professionals to this day who claim that cigarette smoking has nothing to do with heart disease, asthma, or any other medical issues. So there are always going to be some outliers. I also discovered that 82.5% of Americans in this country favor masking. That's, to me, an obvious majority. It's something that I think we have to factor into making our decisions. I was an athlete for many, many years, and I have to say I did not play on teams that won every game. But when I see all of this continued hassle over the masking, I can't help but think of something I learned in athletics. When you don't win every game, what happens? My advice to the anti-masking minority is the same thing I had to do as an athlete. When you lose, suck it up and move on. The game should have been over a long time ago. Thank you.
Our open forum portion of the meeting has ended. We'll move on to...
Madam Chair, I would like to move that we add 10 more minutes to open forum tonight, since there is a good amount of public speakers who have not had the opportunity to address us.
Our practice has been that we offer 10-minute open forum, no matter if we have one person, no people, or 15. So I would like to keep it that way, and we'll move on to celebrating.
There's a motion on the table.
I would second that motion.
We will have quiet in the gallery, all right? We are conducting business of the school.
Point of order, there's a motion on the table.
There's a motion to extend the open forum section of the meeting, and a second. Is there any discussion?
The board arbitrarily sets the policy that's in place, and the board ultimately can make changes as needed. It's a board-set policy. Board can adapt as needed. There were 15 members who wanted to address the board. The selection process could seem as if we were trying to stifle public input. Rarely do we ever have anybody here wanting to talk to us, and so I would like to provide more of an opportunity for the community to share their input. We know there's a lot of thoughts going on right now, and it's important for people to feel heard.
I just want to say, I think it takes a lot for people to come and talk to us. It's very uncomfortable for a lot of them. So to have so many signed up, regardless of what they have to say, I'm willing to listen. I would be willing to listen to everybody, but I think Jill's motion is a good start, so.
I'm a little concerned about voting to contradict one of our own policies. I've been to board meetings where that policy didn't exist many years ago, and it wasn't a pretty sight. It went on and on and on, and it just accelerated and got quite literally out of hand. So, in fact, I'm quite certain that that's why that policy was put in place many years ago, so that we could maintain some integrity in our proceedings, and so I would not be in favor of contradicting our own policy.
Our policy sets boundaries for our operation. Just like we have a policy for our agenda, we can add to our agenda, we can make motions to change it. It's the same thing. These parameters were put on during the calendar discussion. I was on the board when it happened. They're very limiting. I mean, even in the council, you don't see 10 minutes. Rarely do boards limit for 10 minutes in a public setting. And 10 minutes is not out of line, and in the future I'll be requesting that we revisit this policy. But my motion stands for tonight.
Any other discussion?
With the business at hand this evening, most of what we're going to hear, we've been hearing and hearing. Out in the community, I'm going to tell you, it's been about 20-1 on the issue that they're talking about. And to just keep rehashing it and rehashing it, we need to get on with our business and do what we need to do. Every point is valid in what they have to say, but we're not hearing anything new, so I feel we need to move on. I will vote no. Shut them up.
Point of order. I think one rap is enough. My ears are having a problem.
Madam Chair, I don't need to sit through this crap. I'm tired of it. It's a bunch of bull.
I am, as board chair, I'm calling a recess for this meeting.
Thank you.
And the board will leave, and we will find a room downstairs. Dr. Funk will help facilitate that. We are recessing until we can gain order.
Then a time limit needs to be,
In 10 minutes, we will come back, and the school board meeting is now back in session. We have a motion on the table. Is there any additional discussion?
Call the question, please.
Motion has been made and seconded that we add 10 minutes to our open forum. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye. Motion is not carried. Moving on to the next agenda item. The next agenda item is celebrating district success. Ted Herman, would you please come forward?
Chris Dillon, why don't you come down here too if you're So I have had the great fortune of working with Mr. Herman for probably about half of his career here in the school district, last 12 years. And before that, he served another 10 years. And so Ted is going to be retiring here at the end of the month. And, you know, I think one of the best parts about having school resource officers in school is people get to understand kids and they develop relationships with kids, and they really become another resource for our students. And the best resource officers are like Mr. Herman, who really know how to relate to students. And Ted, on behalf of myself and the school board, I want to give you this plaque here. And thank you for 22 years. And I know you got this guy standing next to me here who probably has a few words himself.
I'm just gonna go on. I've been here. I'm in my fourth year as a administrator. 2 years before that as a dean of students at the high school. And the guy standing next to me in 6 years has taught me more about reaching out to the community students than any classroom will ever give you. And I know we're gonna miss you, Ted, every day. I know people are kind of disappointed you've decided that now's the time to go. But I want to thank you for everything you've done for me, for the students, and for the families of Albert Lea. And I know we're going to miss you a lot. And Mr. Khan's got some giant shoes. Congratulations, sir.
I've been doing this almost, I've been a police officer for 28 years and a school resource officer for 22. It was exciting. It was fun. I worked for many, many years with Mr. Score. It's been exciting. I really appreciate the opportunity to be an SRO in the state of Minnesota, and especially for the school district of Albert Lea. I brought Officer Khan because he's my new replacement. He will step in my shoes quite willingly, and he'll do a great job. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Moving on to number 5, approval of today's agenda. I would like to, before we go on to approval, I would like to add to the agenda under effective and efficient operation, 10.5. The Minnesota State High School League Cooperative Sponsorship with NRHEG. Is there a motion to approve the minutes with that addition? The agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
I have a discussion item. So will there be an evaluation summary presented tonight? I don't see that on the agenda.
It'll be during I think in the past it's been that the board chair does it during their board.
No, in the past, it's been an agenda item.
So that's how we're going to do it tonight, and then we'll talk about it for preview. Okay? So any other conversation or?
We'll talk about it for previous.
For future. I apologize.
Jill, I have been on the board with as the ex officio member for the past 12 years. It has not always been a separate action item. The chair on many occasions has done it as part of the report.
Thank you. I've been on the board 15 years, and I checked last year's, and it was an agenda item before approving the agenda. Thank you.
Are you making a motion to add it to the agenda?
I can't make an motion right now. We have a motion on the table.
Okay. So is all those in favor of the agenda that was first and seconded, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
All right. Moving on to consent items. Is there a motion to approve consent items?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to reports, number 7, 7.1, Superintendent Report.
My comments will be for the COVID update and comments also on the State High School League, so nothing to report.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and start with Angie for school board reports.
Right. Is this on? Right before this meeting, Neil and I met as part of the Finance Committee, and Jennifer Walsh gave us an update on the levy that's coming up, and I believe she's talking about that later in the meeting, so I'll leave that to her. Then also earlier in the month, I think it was the 10th, I attended the Business and Education Committee with Dennis and Kim. And the first thing I noticed, we've been meeting via Zoom. First thing I noticed is Dennis is supposed to be retired, but he was still in his office and he was still working, so there's a lot of work ethic there, Dennis. But we talked, as always, about a bunch of things. The main things that stood out were the Youth Apprenticeship Program, the Youth Skills Training Program, again, the ongoing unemployment situation, and Kim had some interesting comments on a poverty initiative that she's involved with, so I'm sure you guys will both have more to add.
Dennis?
I think Kim will have a lot of the information with the Perkins grant, and we did a lot of discussion on youth skills training. I think we're seeing some new inroads there. Also credit for prior learning at Riverland, lab experience, just so kids can move along quicker down those avenues. Talked a little bit about the daycare unemployment. The $300 went away September 4th. A lot of the businesses and places in the community are still struggling, trying to find the staffing to be able to do that. Leadership reads will be via Zoom. That was on September 17th, and it'll be again on October 15th. Lead Albert Lee, the leadership program for newer individuals in the community is on hold again due to COVID. We're hoping that can get off the ground and get moving fairly quickly. Also attended the Worksite Wellness Committee, and a lot happening there. Actually, one of the things they're looking at is some more direction, educating the public, really from a neutral stance, from medical research, getting all entities involved. It would be some doctors from Mayo Clinic, doctors from Mercy, any other nurse practitioners available, just to do an educational, upbeat, informational session for the workforce in dealing with everything going on right now, so we can hopefully continue down a good road and help meet the needs of everybody in our community. That's all I got.
Thanks. Go ahead, Neil.
Thank you. As Andrew suggested, I also attended the Financial Committee, and I will, as Angie suggested, leave that up to our financial director. I'm very active in the Education Foundation, and we have one event down and 2 to go. We had a fundraiser this week at the winery. That was a rousing success. I was afraid that nobody would show up, but we had a good crowd, and I was very happy with that. It was especially pleasant to hear some of the recipients of one particular program of the foundation, the teacher grant program, and 3 teachers were there and had nothing but praise for the opportunity that they had to extend their resources in their classrooms. The 2 that are to go, the Hall of Fame banquet is coming up this weekend, the 25th of this month at the Cove, and then next month on October 14th, as I've announced several times, the Distinguished Educator and Distinguished Alumni recipients will be honored, and that's on the 14th at the Cove. And one of the really neat aspects of the Distinguished Alumni program is that on the next day, on the 15th in the morning, those 4 successful alumni of Albert Lee High School will speak to the seniors at Albert Lee High School and hopefully provide them with some insight as to what it contributes to being successful. It's interesting, the paper that I'm taking notes on is from the Region 1 AA Minnesota State High School League Region AA committee members, and I find that my name is on the committee, which is a good example. If you can't beat them, join them. We have, among other things, have acted on one of the items that's on our agenda today. So that's it for my report.
Thank you, Neil. Jill?
I attended the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Other Drugs Prevention Committee meeting. There was a recap of the fair booth. The Freeborn County did not win the PCN grant award. Another neighboring county showed higher need for that. Fall opportunities were presented, including perhaps setting up the bedroom for the teen bedroom model for an interactive parent kind of recording that could be shared with other communities. Many other areas are interested in that bedroom. I've received a lot of questions from the community about lockdowns, hard and soft lockdowns, and the notification process with that. So I'll be asking some questions regarding that. I'm also awaiting some answers to my questions from the chair and waiting for some information from the couple other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Bruce?
Starting to receive information on the Teacher of the Year nominees now, and I'm looking forward to the Athletic Hall of Fame banquet this weekend. Some great nominees.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. For my report, I did attend the Business Ed Committee with Dennis and Angie, and there was significant talk about all of the initiatives regarding students and getting them into the work field or the workforce and being trained and viable. So a lot of conversations about Worksite opportunities to go out and job shadow or also be kind of like OJT in the days, I guess. So a lot of conversations around that. Also, I was at the Worksite Wellness Committee too, and it was interesting to me. Our census went up in Albert Lea to 18,500. So that's good for the district, in that we potentially will see some enrollment increases. Also, I attended the event for the Education Foundation, and it was a nice event, really showcasing teachers, and it was well represented with teachers and personnel from the district. I also want to read the statement for the evaluation of the superintendent. The board conducted their annual review and discussion of the superintendent in regards to his duties and responsibilities. We are pleased with Dr. Funk's objective leadership as he effectively and efficiently led the district through a very difficult COVID time, along with his continued strong fiscal management. The superintendent directed the development of a fully accredited online school option and continues to be involved with the high reliability school effort, which began last year. Strides have been made to increase communication with the district and the wider community through these challenging times of the pandemic. So thank you. We do usually have a student report at this time, and we don't have a student. And I'm thinking that, is there another teacher other than what Al reported that you're aware of? Okay. So we will go ahead and move on to Safe and Healthy Schools. 8.1, COVID update. Kathy.
So I think we'll go to the second slide to start with. So these are the numbers I've been providing to the board, and this is July. So in yellow, those are the Freeborn County positives for school-aged individuals. So that's July. And then we move into August on the left, and here we are in September on the right. And you can see, as we've shared, I share this weekly in our board update. It's available. And so you'll see significant more yellow. Now, keeping in mind, Freeborn County this is not just our school district, but Alden and Glenville and a little bit of some outlying communities. So the last numbers I have are today. So I know from the Minnesota Department of Health, we have 9 new cases in the county, and that would be on Friday. So tomorrow we will get Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So they no longer report on the weekends. I do not know the active cases. I usually get that from Freeborn County Public Health, and they haven't published that yet today. I did check just a little bit ago. I suspect it'll drop maybe 10, 15, 20. If you go back 10 days, we had 32, but we increased 9. I don't have all of those statistics, but that's kind of where we are today with active cases. And then to the next slide. So this is that information just graphed, and the red line is the active cases in the county. Blue are new cases, and then the bars on the bottom are the school-aged positive cases. So that's where we are from July 1 to today. I suspect that line will come down, but again, I don't have that data yet. So, and this is where we are as we talked about the decision tree. Should we hit 5% in any district based on enrollment? That is the numbers in the second column. Those are the buildings. And those are active cases as of noon today. We also used to provide this information to Department of Health, but now we don't have to. So we have 21 total active cases as of noon today. And we also publish that graphically on our dashboard every day. So that's our cases. The other thing that the board has asked a little bit of information about is the impact of all that's going on staffing. And so I want to talk a little bit about fill rates. So these are all of our staff except for custodians. So this is fill rates. And it changes throughout the day. So in yellow at the bottom is, as of about 1:10 p.m. today, we had a fill rate started at 44% this morning. That means number of people who are taking positions, substitute positions. And that's in all areas, not just teaching, paraeducators, office, et cetera. But I'd like to draw your attention to the second line, really all the way across. That is our internal subs, hour by hour, and it's not complete. Last secretary I talked to today was at 1:10. So we had staff out and filled with 26 hour-by-hour subs. So these are our licensed staff who are giving up an hour, their prep or supervision, if they can give up their supervision. Obviously, if they're doing a study hall, they can't give that up. So they're giving up their prep time. And you'll see really across the 3 weeks, our highest was 2 weeks ago at 36. And today, as of 1:10, we were at 26. We are increasing our external subs. We were able to have 15 external subs today. And know that we took 6 subs out of our pool and hired them as permanent online subs. So really, we're looking at 21 there.
Just a couple comments, Kathy.
Yep.
So I can tell you we meet with the teacher leaders every week. And last Thursday, we met Thursday morning. And feedback I'm getting, and these numbers kind of demonstrate it, feedback I'm getting is that they are more stressed to start the school year than they've ever been. And you can see it with when I have 36 teachers who come to school to teach their kids are suddenly, okay, now you got to go teach somewhere else because we don't have enough subs to fill it. The other interesting thing that I have heard, and I've heard this a couple times over the last few days from substitute teachers, is they have agreed we have a few more subs coming back to work now. And one of the things they have told me is, I'm willing to work if we are masked, but if we're not universally masked, then I do not feel comfortable. I may have elderly parents at home I'm taking care of, or they may be at risk for health themselves. So that has helped a little bit, that we've had a few more subs come back. But the biggest concern I have is if we're asking subs, I mean, you can look at that week 2 weeks ago, 26, 36, 17, 27, to have teachers covering other classes, and right out of the gate, starting in the school year this way, that is a challenge. Last week was not as bad. But today the numbers were significant again. So that is a concern we have, because we do have a limited pool of subs in this district. And I just thank the teachers for stepping up and helping each other out here.
I think in the unfilled and/or absorbed, those are mostly paraeducator positions that aren't filled, but also office staff, if a building secretary is out. As we told you at the last meeting, we took 2 building secretaries from this building to backfill in a building that didn't have any office staff. It is also, the last line, the long-term leaves, these are basically, if it's a classroom teacher, we have that filled, but we have a couple of counselors. I have 2 staff who are on intermittent leaves, and so one is office staff, one is in a media area, so we don't fill some of those. And so we stretch and pull. I know that Sheila Reby, Executive Director of Special Ed Services, spends time in the morning working with principals to help them. Where is it more important that we pull this person versus this person? We are pulling our interventionists. We are pulling our sometimes resource specialists. We try not to pull school social workers and counselors, as they have different licenses, but we have to have a grown adult in with the children, and so that is a challenge. And I know today when the last secretary I talked with, it was a 1:10 in the afternoon, and she was still looking to fill the last 2 hours of the day. And these were in addition to 2 teachers who had overload, so not just 5 hours, but really 6 hours and their supervision. So, kudos to the teaching staff. But oftentimes that's the same person across, the same 5-6 people who are doing that, and that's hard. I mean, we know our special ed staff have stepped up, which means for many of them, they give up their due process hour, which we're trying to improve on due process and train and help, work through that area. But, so another question that came up, and I know was asked, well, why are teachers out? Why are any staff out? And so I did just a very quick analysis this morning. So we have 4 staff out on PTO or vacation, Mondays and Fridays. We try to honor those. We had 8 staff out, ill or at medical appointments, and these are full days, so not hour by hour. We had 7 staff out with children who were ill. We had 2 staff out with short-term surgeries, and we had 3 staff out with COVID testing of some sort. And then, as I said, 6 to 8 staff out on any given day who are on FMLA. So,
part of when you talk about COVID, part of what we do every day is we screen every staff member. We ask them to fill out a screener on how they're feeling. And we encourage people, as we have for the past 18 months, if you are not feeling well, do not come to work. And so I think you're seeing some impact from that.
And as we talked about a month ago, we really want to get out of that medical decision-making here. But if you have these symptoms on the decision tree, contact the nurse line or your medical provider. And that is what they are doing. So those are the stats. I don't have any questions on any of those.
I do have a few questions if I can throw them at you.
Sure.
They should be pretty easy. The first one, you answered a couple of them. I'm just wondering, are we seeing people compared to last year getting sicker than last year? And I'll just say this, my understanding is that normally viruses mutate naturally to be more contagious but less deadly, which I'm hoping is what we're seeing, but there are concerns that it might be more dangerous too with some variants and for other reasons. So I'm just curious, are we seeing people get sicker, or does it seem like we're just seeing more cases from what you can tell? Staff put in ASAP they're ill. We don't, I don't ask for any details on that. Okay. On their check-in, they do put if they have a flu-like symptom, a cold symptom, or either they've been exposed to COVID or there's somebody ill in their household, and then please explain. I will say, actually, right now I can go through them much quicker than I do all the staff, so about 500 a day, and I can get through them pretty quickly now as relative to last year. Okay. That's good. Is natural immunity being considered when it comes to quarantining decisions, or do you still have to quarantine even if you've had COVID before?
So how we're quarantining is if a student is positive, obviously they have to quarantine for 10 days.
Mhm.
If they're in a classroom and the classroom everybody is masked, then those students do not have to quarantine unless they have symptoms. We are allowing them the early out, so test at day 5, come back at day 7 with no symptoms and a negative, or not test and come back at day 10 with no symptoms. The only other ones that, for the most part, that we have 2 other groups. We know we have some students who refuse to mask, and if they are 6 feet for 15 minutes or longer of a positive in a classroom, they will have to quarantine, and we give them the same option, the early out. And if they're at lunch, 15 minutes or longer, 6 feet or closer.
So Angie, if they're within 90 days of a positive,
Yes.
then they're considered naturally immune for that 90-day period, and they're not quarantined.
Okay, that's correct. And then also if they're, we do ask them, if you're vaccinated, they don't have to answer. And if they don't, we just give them, well, here's the option 1 and here's option 2. I do all employees, and our LSNs do work with our resource specialists to talk with parents and families.
Okay. No, thank you. And
Yep.
I mean, I think we're starting to see some studies say that natural immunity lasts longer than 3 months. So I just wondered if that might be helpful logistically to consider down the road. Another question.
So we would look for that guidance from the Department of Health.
Okay.
Yep.
As I'm looking at our guidelines, and you had just mentioned too, if people are exposed, well, both parties are wearing a mask, they don't have to quarantine. And I'm just wondering, some masks are really good at filtering the viruses, and some really aren't as effective. Is that factored in? I'm just wondering if possibly that could cause some spread too.
Again, we use the MDH CDC guidelines for students and staff because that is what we fall under as a public entity.
Okay.
And so we aren't out measuring masks. We aren't, we are asking, are you masked? And that's really the extent of it. We give out thousands of masks. We have given out thousands of masks on the buses, which is, again, we're required to on public transportation. And then we offer a mask to students when they come to school if they don't have one.
Okay. I do have a few more. I'm sorry, I'll be as fast as I can. Students who would feel more comfortable at this point moving to an online format, can they be accommodated, or when would they be able to switch?
So that's not my area.
Oh, okay.
I believe they were accommodated until Mary Jo was at last Friday, and then at the quarter again they can switch here in mid-October.
Okay.
So
Mid-October. And then I was curious, what percentage of kids roughly weren't wearing masks before we required them? Was it most of them were not, I'm guessing?
I would say 90% were not wearing masks.
Okay. And then, according to the numbers you had up there, if my math is right, it looked like it was about 0.5% of our students and staff are currently sick with COVID. And I'm just curious, do we know, I've been asked this a couple different times, do we know how that compares to the number of people who would have normally been sick in years prior to COVID from cold or flu?
Again, we don't ask what they're sick with. Our staff just put in ill, and when parents call into school prior to this year, it was my child is out ill, and that's the data we have.
And I can tell you, we have not seen substitute fill rates like this for years. Never since I've been in the district have they been this bad. So there's definitely more absences.
But if they're not all from COVID, you can't blame it all on.
Go ahead.
Excuse me, sorry, I'll let you finish, I promise. This is really a time for the board to interact with and get reports from the administration so we can guide the district. So we'd really appreciate if you keep your comments to yourself during this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my last question was, from what I can tell, COVID is probably here to stay in one form or another. And I'm just wondering, do you see us operating like this for many years, or do you kind of have an end game of what you're looking for before we can? Are we just waiting for guidance from the state is kind of what is determining this?
So I don't, if you want to.
You go ahead.
I mean, we have some data from the University of Minnesota, and I know that Dr. Funk is going to talk about that in a little bit. We know that there's surges, and there's waves, and there's And so I think as we look at some of this data that comes out of our University of Minnesota and other public health entities, we all want to move out of this. Yep. You're welcome. Thank you for asking.
I have a couple questions
Sure.
too. So can you explain a 6-foot move to a 3-foot parameter? Can you tell us a little bit about what
Sure.
that was?
So last spring, the Department of Health and the CDC provided guidelines to school districts that allowed us to come back as the numbers were waning at 3 feet. And we did, and everyone was masked. And then starting this fall, everything became recommendations other than well, I should say the contact tracing still became recommendations, but they were identified as best practices for school districts, and that was the name of the document that we received from the Department of Health. These are the best practices. And so right now for contact tracing, the best practice is still 6 feet, and so that is what we're using when they're unmasked.
Thank you. And so students can wear any mask that they choose at this point?
Correct. Correct.
And what systems are in place, if any, to track mask offenders?
So I know there was a concern raised that in particular at the high school we were tracking students who so let me give you the scenario. So a week right before Labor Day, it was Thursday, we were off Friday and through Monday, and we had a number of positive cases, and it was 5 o'clock, and our nurses had reached out to, and we weren't masked at that point, so our nurses reached out to our staff asking who was within 6 feet. And typically we can take a seating chart and absence, and our nurses and our resource specialists can take a look at who was within 6 feet. And we were good with that. Now when we move to masking, it is if they're both masked, then neither have to, the positive has to go, but the students around within 6 feet, if they're masked, we would not send them home. We would let them know you were close contact. But now we have students who we know don't wear their masks well, and so for every positive in a classroom, our nurses and resource specialists have to contact 7 classroom teachers and get that information back. And at the end of the day, we run into the situation where we don't know always who was a good masker, whereas before we could look at the seating chart. And so now we look at the seating chart, we don't want to send those kids home who were masking. So we are asking teachers to be more cognizant, because truly we will find out about a positive 2 days later, and they will say, you want me to think back 2 days to who was well masked and who wasn't? And so we're just asking them to help with the contact tracing. And we don't want to send kids home if they are masking. And so it's not a master list of any sort. It's to help teachers just, be more cognizant of that, not being disparaging, of course, to students, encouraging them to mask. But if they don't, we want their parents to know that under our current model, we will quarantine them. So good question, and thank you for asking.
Kathy, mine is more of a different direction. I'm most concerned about our staff and faculty and the long-term effects of this kind of coverage that they're under. Are there supports to them, or should we be talking about that, or am I opening up something? I'm just really, I think we see the numbers, and we hear about the extra stuff that is having to happen. And we've heard it for a year, especially like our nursing staff and building administrators, and I'm just really concerned about their capacity to continue on this path. Have we talked at all about that, or can we help with that?
So we have, as Mike said, union leadership has been pretty clear that some staff are very concerned. I will tell you, the first weekend of contact tracing, our LSNs really struggled, and so we made some decisions. I know myself. I have a out of office email for staff if they have questions on the weekend. I shouldn't be their medical person. They need to call their medical provider or the nurse line, and we provide that information. But we see our staff, This is a constant stress. Should we mask? Shouldn't we mask? On the bus, in the hallway. This is a different stress. They love these children they're working with, and they want to do right by them, and we know the board wants to do right by them, but it is a stress. And now that hour that you used to get to prep for your kids, you're going to step up and now sub 26 teachers today plus, or the teacher who got pulled entirely out of their job today to be with kids and serve children. And I know we're not alone across the nation. And I can say we appreciate all points of view, and we're trying to do what's right and best by our children, but I am 3 weeks away from a grandchild, and I would like to be protected and see that child as myself. Thank you. Thanks for asking.
We have such a challenge right now, and one of the things I'm seeing is if we see there's a light at the end of the tunnel here in 2 months or 3 months, I think the worst fear is if we end up having to go back to distant learning, we know the negative effects that has on the children and the ability to get them caught up. So the more that we can keep them in the classroom right now and keep them moving forward, it seems that's our avenue, but we need to look out for the teachers and the staffing so we don't burn them out as well. Nobody's going to be happy with where things are at. There's so many different views on it, but it's a fine line. If we can keep it going in the right direction, knowing that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel, then I'm thinking we're serving the whole needs of the entire community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, moving on to 8.2, resolution of healthy and safety measures for 2021-2022 school year. This is an action item. Dr. Funk?
So we met a few weeks ago, and I showed you some data, and we have kind of gave you a heads up that this is the direction that we were going to be heading as a district. And so essentially it works as this. We're going to implement the following health and safety measures. One, we will try to slow down a little bit, actually go back up. We will try to physically distance, hand wash, respiratory etiquette, cleaning and disinfect, contact tracing, screening, all these things that we already do. 2, all staff, students, and visitors within Independent School District 241 buildings must wear a mask regardless of vaccination status as specified in the CDC guidance for COVID-19 prevention. Universal masking will remain in place until the COVID daily rate per 100,000 people drops below 150 for 7 consecutive days. Do you have that other chart, Ashley? So here's the current Freeborn County numbers. Okay, we're currently at 416. And the number on the right, the 90.5, is the number that they used last year. And that's cases per 10,000 over a 2-week period. The number on the left is cases per 100,000 over a 7-day period. That's the new CDC guideline is using that number. They say you can equate the two by, it's not quite accurate, but divide 416 by 5, and you get about 80, which would be last year's data. Last year, we really, 30 or less using last year's numbers was kind of the number that we felt comfortable being in school. So this year, taking that same math, we have landed on 150, which according to the CDC data is still red, but if you look at the MDH data on the right, 30 is in the yellow-green line there. So it's not a perfect science. None of this is. But scroll down a little bit, Ashley. But this is our journey. As many of you are aware, we made the initial recommendation I did back in July to recommend masks, and you can see where our numbers were back in July. And I can tell you, as superintendent, I want as least disruption for our students in our schools as possible. So I was very comfortable making that initial recommendation. And the board in mid-August, right about the time we started to get into the red a little bit, concurred and approved that to start the school year. Well, you can see where the school year has gone for our county, and we were at the top last week, and we've dropped a bit, and I mean, we've dropped probably 100 and some in the past few days. And so the projections are the dots there on the right, and the purple diamonds, and you can see we're continuing to drop according to the forecast for the next few. So they have us forecasting down to 234 or 243 by Friday. That's the estimate using this. So it's not a perfect science, but our recommendation, you can go back to the resolution, is if it's below 150 for 7 consecutive days, as measured by the University of Minnesota School of Public Health, the superintendent is hereby authorized, after consultation with the board chair and notification to the school board, to select and implement different health and safety measures for the school district or any specific school buildings without school board action, kind of like we have been operating to start the school year. So now that's the good news if it gets below that 150 for 7 consecutive days. The flip side of that, continue to scroll, is if it goes back up above 150 for 7 consecutive days, then, and I don't want to be on a roller coaster, but that's what the board would direct the superintendent to resume universal masking for K-12 students and all staff. And we will continue to, on a monthly basis, as we are doing tonight, provide updates to the school board on this. So what this does is this gives us an objective metric that we could meet as a school district, and it's not, okay, willy-nilly, you're just making a decision. So that's my recommendation to the board.
Thank you, Dr. Funk. This is an action item.
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
You know, I think my job as a board member right now is to keep kids in school, or try to keep kids in school. And if that means wearing masks, if masks are going to help do that, I'm all for it. I've got 3 grandkids in the system, and I asked them, do you mind wearing a mask? Do you and your friends mind wearing a mask? And they said, not if it'll keep us in school. We don't like distant learning. We don't like hybrid learning. We want to be in school with a teacher in front of us with our friends.
I have a question. Why is this resolution needed? In August, the board voted, I voted against, but the board voted to give the superintendent authority to make all these kind of decisions along with the chair and just notify the board. So why do we need this new resolution?
Because I've heard loud and clear from the community that they want the board involved in this, and so now we're having the board as an opportunity to be involved.
Which brings up a point that we have discussed as a board as well about whether things are operational, whether they're not. Do we vote on them? Do we not? Do we abstain because we think they're whatever? In my opinion, this is not operational. This is board jurisdiction. But I have a concern when we use it, when it's convenient, or when we want to say the board said it. You know, to me, if we vote against operational issues, then we should be voting against doing this if we already have the other resolution in place. Does this proposal negate the previous resolution from last month?
This is consistent with the resolution from last month. The resolution from last month said the board voted to recommend masks to start the school year. The superintendent made that recommendation to the board in August. I'm now making a similar recommendation to universally mask, and still with some more data here that we can look at. But the board did vote to recommend masking in August.
So when the recommendation came out, it was prior to the board meeting. So the recommendation was already in place. And then in August afterwards, a couple weeks after, the board voted for this resolution to say the superintendent can make choices.
This was consistent with how we've operated throughout the pandemic. In August of 2020, we started the school year operating in a certain manner, and the board approved the manner of which we operated, which was hybrid, in person, and online. So we've been operating consistently for the past 13 months regarding these resolutions.
So I believe that this resolution is really putting some data and actually more objective than subjective that some folks were concerned about. And so I believe that this resolution just adds to what was already in place. That's my feeling. Anyone else have any comments?
Yes. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dennis.
I think it just strengthens what we had talked before. I know when we initially had started, it allowed the district to go by building, but I think because of where things are at right now, and with I like the number that we're below 150, masking goes away. If it does, so we can keep the kids in school, we're able to do that then. We're looking out for the safety of the teachers, the staff, the kids, everybody. And I think it's just an extension of what we had voted on before.
Actually, both resolutions mention the district or each individual school.
Yes, Neil.
I would agree that the resolution is perhaps somewhat redundant, but we've voted, we've approved other resolutions that were also somewhat redundant, all in the interest of accommodating a public who would like to see the board take more affirmative control of the direction of the district. We did the flip side of this resolution a couple months ago. So I don't see that it does any harm. It reasserts the arrangement where we pay people to manage this district, and those people have access to resources that we don't have. They're available to make decisions in a very timely manner when decisions are critical. So, and again, granted, the resolution is probably redundant because management had that ability in the first place, but we've simply restated that and have assured the public that the board is supportive of the decisions that that our management is making.
Angie, you had something?
Yes. I had just wanted to comment that I understand why this resolution was brought up, and I would understand why people would vote for this. I do assume that this will likely pass. I don't think I will probably vote for it unless my mind is changed in the next few minutes, because there are a couple premises that it's based on that I just don't agree with at this point. And the main one is the idea that masks can only help and that they can't hurt. And depending on the individual, I don't think that's true. There are some situations and some people where masks can cause harm. And I could list some physical ones, such as breathing through a dirty mask all day or breathing in your exhaled waste all day. You know, I don't believe the body is meant to work like that. Another point that it comes up every now and then, but I don't think it gets enough weight, is the point of mental health and depression and anxiety and suicide. If we take a step back from COVID and look at a bigger picture of safety, because I do agree that we do need to put safety first, the second leading cause of death for teenagers is actually suicide. And some students, some people really do struggle with depression and isolation and anxiety from masking. And so I think we need to find a balance where we don't want to we obviously don't want to lose anybody in our district or our community from COVID, but we also don't want to, in my opinion, overreact in one area that might cause more harm in a different area. We don't want to take a struggling student and make them feel like this is never going to end, we can't do this another year, and push them over the edge. So I'm looking at it just a little bit differently than everybody else, and for that reason and a few others, I am just much more comfortable leaving these decisions up to the individual families. So just wanted to explain, if I vote no, why that is.
What is the website for the University of Minnesota School of Public Health data? Because I tried looking for it, I couldn't find it, and I don't think that we've gotten the link. Thank you. And do we know how that compares to our county numbers that we see continually? What would 150 be in county active cases?
Kathy?
You do have the link on the slides that are on the board report. I just put that on there today. So I will tell you, I would have to sit down and take a look at those numbers versus these. Our county population is 30,000, and so this is per 10,000, and so, we have to divide that, I'm assuming, by 3. But I can give Sue Yost and Anita Majerus a call at Cleveland County Public Health and walk through that. Thank you. Yep.
Any other discussion? There's been a motion and seconded to pass the resolution of health and safety measures for 2021 and 2022 school year. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-2. 4-2, sorry. No, Dave. I apologize for that. All right, moving on to curriculum and instruction, nothing under that. So we'll go to effective and efficient operations. Policies for review, 10.1, policy 533, wellness. That's the first reading, and Jennifer Walsh is the presenter.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So we did present this to the policy committee. This is a revision of a policy that was revised and approved in July of 2018. There are a few changes. A lot of it was language that was moved from one section to another, but to summarize the changes, this is a student wellness policy that refers to the nutritional and physical wellness of our students, and it encourages all students to make healthy choices. Some of the key revisions that school meal programs do need to follow all state, local, and federal guidelines and meet USDA standards, and that we should try to accommodate religious, ethnic, and cultural diversity of all students when meal planning. As far as the school food service personnel, the district will designate someone to be responsible for the food service program and ensure that there is continuing education for all food service staff. Under other foods and beverages, we now also have to have a wellness coordinator for the school district, and that person will oversee a wellness committee. One of the duties of that committee is to continue to refer to our wellness policy, which does need to be put up on the district website, as do all of our policies are. But to review that policy and create this committee that will then make sure that student wellness is a consideration for all foods offered on campus. And that would include providing some healthy party and celebration ideas to parents and administration. This committee would provide a list of suggested food and beverages to parents for snacks that they may send to the school, that we would not be using food as a reward or incentive for good behavior, and provide a list of suggested healthy fundraising ideas. The implementation of this, we would post a policy on the website. The wellness coordinator under this policy will now provide an annual report on the policy, and there will be a triennial or once every 3 years assessment of the policy and how well we are following the policy.
Any questions for Jennifer on this policy? This is for review at this point.
One thing that we noted in the policy committee meeting was that this was just a nutritional wellness plan. It doesn't really address emotional wellness or mental health wellness or all of those community kind of wellnesses. So that might be something to look into in the future, but this is just a nutritional wellness plan.
Correct.
Right. And Dennis, Jill, and I sat with Jennifer during the policy committee, along with Sheila for the next one. So. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you, Jennifer. Moving on to policy 10230, student medication, renumbered to policy 516. This is a first reading. Presenter is Sheila Reby.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We met also a couple weeks ago about the student medication policy and the following revisions to the policy. The purpose of this policy is going to be for both prescription and non-prescription medication, as that is what our past practice has been. The administration of the medication will require a completed signed request from student's parent and healthcare provider. Again, that has been past practice for both prescription and non-prescription medication. Our medication form is a medication authorization form that is required, completed annually at the start of every school year or when a student enrolls during the school year. Prescription, non-prescription medication does come to school in the original container with the label, the dosage, child's name, and physician's information on it. That medication is brought to school by an adult, not carried with the student in their backpack or their own Ziploc bag. We will not maintain EpiPens. The buildings are in close proximity to emergency ambulance service by calling 911, so this will not be in the policy. At the end of the school year, when we do have medication that is unclaimed, where parents have not picked it up, they are given notice by our health clerk, health office, licensed school nurse. What we will do moving forward is we will request that a law enforcement agency transport the medication to the law enforcement center. If they are not able to do so, we will require and have 2 individuals, which typically it has been our 2 licensed school nurses, transport the medication. They're transported in the prescription bottle, name is blacked out, the count of the medication is taken, and then that officer is notified when that will be taking place, so they are aware when this is being transported to the LEC. Again, we will request that they transport it, but if not, we will let them know the 2 individuals and the details before that transport is made. Any questions?
I know we discussed this in the policy committee and kind of made those adjustments there at the end, but a thought just comes to me. So when you take it to the LEC, does it just go right into the drop box with the others when it's controlled? Do you put controlled right in with the other medication?
Yes, there
in
is
the
a drop box, and there's always someone there
Same
to
one.
assist you
Oh.
with that, but yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Sheila? All right, thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to 10.2, approval for adoption of proposal 2021 pay 2022 certified levy at maximum. This is an action item, and presenter is Jennifer Walsh.
I can tell you this is far more in my wheelhouse than the wellness policy is. Grab my pen in case you guys have any questions that I need to jot down. So we did meet and discuss the proposed levy at length at the Finance Committee. Just a reminder how this works. So in September, the board approves a proposed levy. And then in December, they certify the final levy. Most years, or certainly years where we don't have some sort of vote, the proposed levy and the final levy generally are the same dollar amount. This year, however, we know that we have a ballot question on the November 2nd ballot that would renew an expiring operating referendum. So what we're going to see here, and you guys were all provided in your board packets the side-by-side comparison. I did provide you another copy tonight because, as I mentioned in the memo that was in the board packet, we were waiting for one item to be included in the proposed levy, which was the lease payment to Riverland for the ALC. And they did do another levy run yesterday at MDE. And so this spreadsheet that you now have before you on line 34, the yellow line, is the difference between what I provided to you in the board packet on Friday and what the levy run now has. So I really consider now that this levy run is very accurate. I don't see any other changes that would be made. So if you look up here, though, so the general fund, what we're seeing in this proposed levy is a $1.5 million decrease. And that is because our operating referendum expires. So it no longer shows up on our levy. If we do not pass the ballot question on November 2nd, we lose the $1.5 million in operating referendum that falls into the levy, plus about another $500,000 that we would get in state aid. The equity revenue, which recognizes that some districts have lower operating referendums than other districts, is actually a little bit increased on the proposed levy, assuming at this point that we won't have an operating referendum. So your equity revenue increases a little bit as your levy would either decrease or go down completely. Next. The community education, this levy rarely changes much from year to year. This levy is generated by looking at the population of your school district and your 0 to 4 child count. So if looking at the spreadsheet, the actual, the general community ed levy was less than $1,000 difference. The early childhood family ed levy actually shifted a little bit more to state. In total, our revenue is going to be about the same, but it's about $1,000 less on the levy. We did have some adjustments for prior years that actually resulted in a $1,500 decrease to the community education. Again, just a little reminder, we are levied for specific items. But then they do always go back and look at prior year actual data. They usually go back about 3 years. Many of our levies are based on our pupil counts. And so the levy is making the assumptions that I have put in to a system with MDE where we put in what we believe our enrollment is going to be. As that enrollment data becomes finalized, they go back and they look to see, okay, this is what the district levied based on an assumption of what your enrollment will be. This is what the actual enrollment was. So we always see adjustments, both positive and negative, depending on actual data as it becomes available. So the community ed levy, portion of the levy went down just a little over, well, $1,500. The other area that we levy is our debt service. And what they look at is, they look at our fiscal year 22-23. I guess I should go back and remind you. So when we talk about the levies, this year is the 21 pay 22. And what that means is this levy is certified in the calendar year 2021. These taxes are then collected from our taxpayers in calendar year 2022, and then they come in as revenue to the school district in our fiscal year 23 or school year 22-23. So they look at our debt service, the bonds that we've passed, and they look at our FY23 principal and interest payments, and then they always add 5% to that. So that's how they come up with our debt service levy. That 5%, that extra 5%, over time, however, starts to add up. So they have a calculation whereby they reduce our levy for excess debt service. So they look at our fund balance at the end of the year. This year they were looking at the fund balance in FY20, and they calculate, okay, your debt service fund balance now has gotten a little bit too big. And so every year we see a reduction or an adjustment for excess debt service, usually somewhere between $70,000 and $100,000. And this year it's $84,000. So right now, this is just a reminder of what our school property tax history has been since 2014. Now this is looking at a $100,000 home. Now we know that over this course of time, a home valued at $100,000 in 2014 probably is valued more now. But what this shows is a $100,000 home every year, if we would take a look at a $100,000 house, in 2014, the school district portion of their property taxes was $427. In this current year, 2021, a home valued at $100,000, the school district portion of their taxes is $430. So again, I'm just beginning my third year here, but I really need to commend, and I hope I've shared this enough in the past, what the administration and the school board has been, really has looked at not only what is in the best interest of our students, but also keeping an eye on what's in the best interest of our taxpayers and melding those two together. So I think this is a very strong illustration that we've been able to maintain programs and facilities without raising taxes to our local taxpayers. Go ahead, Angie, or Ashley, please. So right now, our total proposed levy is that dollar amount there, $7,589,688, which represents a decrease of $1.5 million, or a decrease of 16.5%. Our tax base does continue to increase. Some of our levy is spread out over referendum market value, and some of it is spread out over net tax capacity. And those two have increased every year and continue to increase, which means that our defined dollar amount of our levy gets spread out over a larger tax base, which is a good thing because that's what helps also to keep our individual's levy amount at a lower rate. Go ahead, Ashley. So this illustrates the proposed levy as it stands now, where we have 0 in the voter-approved referendum. We have $407,000 in equity revenue for a total difference of minus $1.5 million, or 16.5%. The second page of the spreadsheet that I have provided to you this evening, and what this illustrates is what the final levy, or something very close to what the final levy will look like if our operating referendum that's on the November 2nd ballot is approved. So our referendum amount will go from 0 to 1.549 million. Our equity revenue will decrease because now we have a referendum in place, and so we don't get as much equity revenue. Plugging those two numbers in, we now end up with a final levy with the total difference of the prior year levy of $1,125, or a percent change of a minus 0.01%. So virtually a levy that's identical to the levy that we certified last year.
So if the voters approve the referendum, the straight renewal, they will see a 0% change in taxes from the school district's portion come November.
Correct. Now, what we've asked of the board in the past, or at least the past years that I've been here, is that, go ahead, Ashley, one more slide, I think, is that we approve the proposed levy for the maximum levy authority. And that way, if our vote is successful in November, we can actually levy for that additional amount. We always ask that we approve at the maximum. Usually there are no changes, but in the case of a vote, if we don't approve at the maximum, we would not be able to levy for that referendum amount.
So by approving at the max, essentially you're asking the board to approve a 0% increase if the referendum passes.
Correct. And that final certification will be at our December 6th meeting, I believe.
Okay, thanks so much, Jennifer. Anybody have any comments or questions for Jennifer? This is an action item.
I move approval.
Is there a second? I'll second. Any discussion?
Jennifer, I like to usually try to put it in layperson's terms.
Sure.
I know you've explained it already, so, but it's hard to understand for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So what we're talking about right now is not the referendum.
Correct.
It's what the community will see as property taxes next year on their tax roll. So, and right now, so tonight we're not making that choice. That choice will be made in December.
Correct.
December 6th will be that vote. So tonight, what we're doing is just setting that top ceiling of what that might be. And then in December, we could go less than last year, the same as last year, hit the max, or anywhere in between. Is that correct?
There is an opportunity to under levy. That sometimes comes at, we would also potentially lose some state aid because we would have to identify those areas that we would under levy. But yes, at the December meeting is when we would certify the final levy, and we will certify it at some specific dollar amount.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that clarification. Anyone else?
I always make this point. I guess if we agree to this resolution, then, and Superintendent Funk pointed it out, if we don't agree to that, then we are turning down somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 from the state of Minnesota, which is taxpayer money, granted. But if we decline to take it, well, then somebody else will take it. So, in my opinion, it would be foolish to not levy at that level.
All right. All those in favor of the adoption of the proposal for the levy maximum? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. .3 referendum update. Dr. Funk is the presenter.
Just a short update. We have been engaged, Jennifer and I. We've already probably had a half a dozen, if not more, sessions where we've gone out and met with folks within the community. It's been very positive feedback to this point. And we have at least a dozen more on the calendar as we move forward here. Again, I'll ask Ashley or Brittany over here. We are trying to get out to the outlying townships as well as we've done historically, and they're trying. So we, throughout the district, we are trying to meet with people and answer questions that they may have regarding this. But it's been a positive start. We're creating an information video that we can post online as well about the referendum. So, and the other thing I'll say real quickly, Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, but did absentee ballots start last Friday? Yep. So people can request an absentee ballot from the county auditor's office, or they can go down there and vote in person if they wish to do so.
Any follow-ups for Dr. Funk? Dennis?
Just a quick question. Any comments or questions that people are asking that might need more understanding, or is it pretty well they're getting what we're doing?
I think it's pretty straightforward. The interesting thing is the ballot language helps us because the ballot language says you're continuing an existing levy. It doesn't say you're asking for an increase. And so when folks see that, that makes sense. The other thing that we remind people is that this is the only thing on the ballot. So this is in November. And, I mentioned the townships. During COVID last year, they were all mail-in ballots. We want to try to get back to a normal election as possible, so we are holding the elections in the precincts, which is, again, people, what's the end game of the pandemic? Well, I think it's an endemic. We want to try and operate as much at a normal period or manner as possible moving forward.
Thanks for that update. 10.4, Minnesota State High School League. This is an action item. Dr. Funk presenting.
So I do not have good news for the high school league for you tonight. We've got the invoice up here. Gonna scroll. You can see that they have changed the manner in which they are now charging us a lot more. Again, for the people who are not familiar with this, I would say 2 years ago, our fees were about $4,000 to the State High School League, and as you can see on the page this year, they want us to pay $17,000, almost just under $17,000. What they have done is this. So last year, again, I think the board has done its due diligence here. The high school league created a $9,000 COVID fee, and they called it a COVID fee until they changed their mind a few months later and decided to call it a membership fee. They weren't within their rights to do that. Albert Lea was one of about 50 school districts in the state of Minnesota that did not pay their fees last year because of the fact that you can't just, it was not within their bylaws and how they can operate. So their board changed their bylaws this June, and they said any unpaid fees from prior years to remain a member, you now have to pay. So with that change in the bylaws, we are now having to pay the $9,000 that we did not pay this past school year. And I've had a number of superintendents call me on this. We seem to have been the poster child for this throughout the state. I think we're the largest school district who didn't pay. And they have all asked me what we're going to do, and my recommendation tonight, as much as it pains me, is to pay it. I've checked with legal. They say basically they have us over a barrel. If we don't pay it, we will not be members anymore. And we have to pay it by October 1st of this year. So that is my recommendation to the board.
Go ahead, Neil.
Before we can discuss it, we need to have a motion on the floor. So I would move to approve the resolution, just for the sake of having discussion.
I'll second, because I know it's the right thing.
Any discussion?
I agree with the superintendent in that the high school league's legal standing is a little sketchy here. I mean, it seems to me that this is akin to convicting someone of a law a law that somebody violated when it wasn't a law, and then penalizing them for it. You know, to suggest that they can retroactively require a fee that wasn't required prior to the effect of that policy, and then punish somebody for not paying that fee when it wasn't against, when it wasn't, a breach of legal action to do it. It doesn't make sense. But having said that, it's a principle that I don't think is worth pursuing, and it'd just be a mess. So I'm thinking that we'd be better off just paying it and get on with it.
What's the consequences to our teams if we don't pay it?
I believe that where's Paul? There he is. Sorry. If you could address that for us.
We've got a saying, if you don't weigh in, you don't wrestle. And in this case, that's what would apply. We wouldn't have any opportunities for our student athletes. So.
And activities, right?
Yeah, and there are some fine arts activities that go along with that at the high school league. So you have your music, your one-act play, a few others in there, robotics and trap league, or trap shooting wouldn't have a state tournament experience. So there's a number of activities that go along with it, along with the athletics.
And this invoice does reflect that unpaid membership. So that's this year's. And then there's also, can you share with us again, there's the formula at the end of the year, if there's some payback potential as well. Is that, am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, I don't believe their formula or decision for how they're going to figure that has been shared. And I don't think it has happened in recent years where they've come out in a position where they can do so. So I don't anticipate us seeing any of that. This year they did adjust, and apparently this 17 ballpark, at 16,977, is reduced from what their original proposal was last year based on their budgeting this summer.
Yeah.
I'm not happy with the way they've listed this, because they have messed around with terminology. 2021 unpaid membership dues. Now that I've had cataract surgery, I can actually read that. $9,000. Those weren't dues; those were fees. The dues were $4,500 or something like that. Those were not dues; those were fees, which appeared no place in their bylaws. There was no provision for that, and we didn't pay them. And now we're being punished for committing something that at the time wasn't a crime. Which, again, I don't think it's worth quibbling over, but I think they ought to, might, if we have a chance, remind them of that. And
yes, Dennis.
Is that a case where on the form we can put a line through that, we're paying it, but just call it COVID fees? I mean, we've got to make a point somehow. Their communication to us has been horrible the whole time, and I think we've still been waiting for a response from them in a right manner. It'd just be nice to see and make them aware that we're not comfortable with how they went about this whole process.
I can send some communication with the payment, if that would please the board. Discussing our concerns about the process. They offered an opportunity for districts a couple weeks ago to come and meet with their board to plead your case on why you can't pay. And I did not, I think I was going to fall on deaf ears, so I didn't want to waste my time, because we've been falling on deaf ears for the past year. So,
It isn't that we can't pay it. It's the principle.
right.
All right.
And now that we're paying almost 17,000, we also need to pay the legal fees as well. Do we know what ballpark we're in for the legal fees?
Hundreds, probably hundreds of dollars, I would say. Nothing significant. Compared to 17,000.
All right, this is an action item. Any other discussion before we take a vote?
I just wanted to say, I had said this at a previous meeting, but thank you to Dr. Funk and Kim and our chair Dave for pursuing this as far as you guys could go to get them to manage this the proper way. So it is appreciated.
Thanks. All right. All those in favor of paying the Minnesota State High School League invoice signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. 10.5, Paul, the Minnesota State High School League Cooperative Sponsorship with NRHEG. This is also an action item we added tonight.
Yeah, thank you for squeezing this in tonight. This is it came about rather recently. New Richland, Heartland, Ellendale, Geneva has requested that we form a cooperative agreement between our two school districts. In this situation, they do not offer dance team in New Richland or at NRHEG. They have interest from one family, and that family has participated in our youth organizations moving up through their years, and now they're at the age where they would like to continue with their experience in dance, and they don't have an avenue there at NRHEG. And so they've reached out to form a cooperative. A few minor details in the discussion. There'll be no financial real commitment there. They don't have any concern over transportation. That will be provided either by NRHEG or the family itself. NRHEG has more co-ops than we do. As a smaller school, they often form these, and they typically will tell families that are looking for a co-op with another district when they form these that they will just transport their kids, their students themselves. So I think in this case, they're looking, the family would bring the student over after school to participate with Albert Lee. And the intent is that they potentially could grow interest in New Richland. And at that time, if numbers increase, we would look to either dissolve the co-op due to their own numbers being strong enough where they could have it, or continue it. But if this one student phases out through graduation, we would dissolve the cooperative. And cooperatives are good for 2 years. So in this case, we're committing to this upcoming school year, 21-22 and 22-23 in this agreement.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, you'll be happy to know that the Region 1 AA Minnesota State High School League committee members considered not only Albert Lee and New Richland and NRG, whatever, request, but 2 others, and the committee voted unanimously to support all of those. Democracy in action.
On that note, the Big 9 Conference has also approved this cooperative agreement. So before the high school league considers those, both the conference and the region or the section that you would participate in would have to approve it. So that's part of the process. And one other thing to note is typically when it's about the ability to provide opportunities for students, we rarely see these get voted down. There is some discussion in that whether it's the best form to provide the opportunities. But in this case, we're making the recommendation that we try this co-op for the next 2 years.
So the co-op is in place for this, it's not just for this, they can add students potentially, or do a new co-op have to happen?
Yes, this would provide opportunities for other students from New Richland to join dance team in Albert Lee. We have been having conversations. The dance team does do tryouts in the fall of each year, and so those have been completed for this upcoming year. So it may be a JV dance team opportunity, that still needs to be ironed out in this case. But yes, more students would be able to join dance from New Richland. Yeah.
One other quick comment. I've been a fan of this sort of an arrangement for a long time, and I would like to see it extended to not only the dance team, but maybe a couple of schools would like to get together and offer a Russian class, or some academic area, cooperatively. It's a nice precedent.
Absolutely. So this is an action item. And anybody else have anything for Paul? We need a motion, I think.
One thing I'd like to note just before we move into a vote is just that this would continue unless we move to dissolve it in 2 years. So it's in place. We won't have to renew it in the next 2 years, but it would stay in place unless we dissolve the cooperative.
We would probably review that at some point along the way, just to make sure we're heading in the right direction.
Yes, yeah.
So previously, I thought you said they only last 2 years, but you're saying we will review it in 2 years and then you can dissolve it, otherwise it does continue?
Correct. So the reason I say 2 years is you're stuck with it for 2 years if you vote on it at a minimum, and then you're able to dissolve it at that time, or just continue without any movement on it.
It looks like it'd be at least 2 renewals, but this participant looks to participate through 12th grade.
Correct, yeah.
I move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 6 to none, sorry. Before we adjourn, our mission is to ensure individual academic, social, and emotional growth that leads to engaged citizens and lifelong learners. Meeting's adjourned.